6 months before the Nuremberg racial laws were passed in Germany, Bill W. was just over 90 days sober in March of 1935 when the last surviving member of the Donner Party, the Breen's youngest daughter Isabella, died. And the AA people thought that constitutionally incapable meant genetically inclined or medically handicapped, just like the Nazis' race laws were stating. The Germans wanted to prove that the Jews could overcome their genetic predisposition towards laziness, and so the concentration camps were structured to verify that people could be taught to work, despite the science of their given genes. And so many people who were forced to work in the camps had chosen to just lay down and die, like so many in the Donner Party had done. Heidegger's warning to the Nazis of the danger of group loyalty was proven by those Donner Party members who'd stuck together and perished one after the other, especially those huddling together in the Forlorn Hope group who met with tragedy, while Reed made it out on his own. 4 years after the Jews were made medically unfit by the Nuremberg racial laws, Hitler's war started in Poland in 1939, and 1 month later, the AAs in New Jersey rented the first facility where AA did not meet in private homes, and the railroads leading to the extermination camps would not be bombed during Hitler's war because those railroads were needed intact when the British separate peace went through, as the British Army joined with the Germans to fight Stalin's Russia. The Pope had made his pact with Hitler on the 20th of July in 1935, 90 days before the racial science laws were passed, and Archbishop Pacelli had been the papal nuncio in Berlin during the Great War and was staunchly anti-communist. While Bill W. and Dr. Bob were starting AA in Ohio in May of 1935, Hitler's speech in the Reichstag reported that Russia and France had signed a mutual assistance pact in Paris on the 2nd of March, and again in Moscow on the 14th of March, but that it had not yet passed through the French Parliament. Britain then signed the English-German naval agreement on the 18th of June in 1935 with the promise that Hitler could have the port of Danzig back. And 90 days after Chamberlain signed, Hitler introduced the Nuremberg racial laws on the 15th of September in 1935, and 30 days later, Germany withdrew from the League of Nations on the 14th of October, on the anniversary of the 1066 Norman conquest of England. Within 4 months of the Nuremberg laws, Edward VIII became the King of Britain in January of 1936, and the French Parliament brought up the Russo-French Pact again on the 11th of February in 1936, quickly passing it 27 votes later on the 1st of March, 353 to 164, and within a week the German army occupied the Rhineland. The Germans marched across the Rhine on the 7th of March in 1936 with strict orders to retreat at the first sign of French resistance, and the British claimed that 35,000 German troops came over the bridge, while Hitler said there were only 4 brigades. And on the 29th of March, Germany voted an overwhelming approval of the new Nazi policies in another landslide referendum. When the Americans captured the Palace of Justice in Nuremberg in 1945 instead of the British, the victorious Americans put kegs of beer in the judges' chamber and turned the bench into a bar. Synthetic fuel at the beginning of 1944 had been supplying over half the total gasoline used by Germany, and supplied almost all of its aviation fuel, and the synthetic gasoline plants at Auschwitz were producing both synthetic fuel and synthetic rubber, and those facilities had finally been bombed in the spring of 1945 when there was no longer any hope of Germany beating Russia after the Americans had found triumph in invading England. In Normandy at the time of the Battle of the Bulge, it had been hoped that the Germans would see the urgency of going after the Americans' fuel dumps, especially the enormous gasoline storage depot at Liège, or Lüttich in the German, and Liège was on the Meuse River, a mere 25 miles west of Malmedy, and Liège had been occupied by the Germans for the entire duration of the Great War. The month after the Bulge failed, FDR suggested to Churchill at Yalta in the Crimea in February 1945 that Russia be given a warm water port at Darien, or Port Port Arthur in the English, to compensate the motherland for having fought the Nazis, but Churchill just ignored him. Howard Hughes had made a movie called HELLS Angels in 1930 that was about German and English friends separated from each other by the Great War. And the HELLS Angels during Hitler's war were the 358th Bomber Squadron, and the HELLS Angels were allowed to keep their bomber jackets at the end of Hitler's war, and those leather flight jackets became the uniform of choice for protection while riding motorcycles. With an apostrophe, HELLS Angels meant angels belonging to hell, but the real name was just HELLS Angels with no apostrophe, and that meant angels among all these hells. And after Hitler's war, America and England remained two brothers born of a common language, with the second ruling the firstborn.